we are not going to be needing this guy today. In fact, we're not going to need any of this. Let's push it all back, get it all out of the way, because today, we're not going to be drawing anything. Today, we're going to be sculpting. Or, at least, I'm going to try and sculpt. I haven't actually sculpted anything since, like, the 9th grade, and I don't recall being particularly good at it back then. So I guess we'll kind of see what happens. This is very much inspired by Jazza's monster sculpting video, and I'm going to be sculpting a Charizard head because I'm super hyped for Detective Pikachu, and a dragon head seems like a fun thing to sculpt. I mean, they've even got a dragon right on the packaging here, so why not? But the other catch of this video is I forgot to buy the tools for sculpting clay. And then when I looked online, they were a bit more expensive than I was expecting, so I decided to be super cheap. And I am going to try to sculpt with kitchen utensils. I have no idea how this is gonna turn out. Also, I highly doubt that I'm gonna use the cheese grater, but who knows? We'll see what happens. It'll all be an experiment. Let's go on a journey together and start trying out some sculpting stuff. So along with my kitchen utensils here, I've also got some tinfoil because I've seen that a lot of people combine using armature wire, which I did buy a little roll of that, armature wire with tinfoil to kind of build the base of whatever they're making. So let's see if that works for me. Now right off the bat, I totally felt like I was just messing everything up. Like building this armature felt so weird. I was worried at first that I'd bought stuff that was too flimsy, and it all felt kind of wrong. So anyone going into this their first time, you should know that I end up liking my end result, but at this stage early on, I just felt ridiculous. Trying to build a Charizard out of wire it's malleable, but it's also, it was hard to get it to do what I wanted, and then putting the tinfoil on it, I still felt like I was just building a weird, derpy, misshaped dragon head. And then I realized with the armature wire, I should have built those things that stick out the back of Charizard's head. So I tried building them with tinfoil after the fact. And when I was doing that, I just thought, oh my gosh, I've messed this thing up so badly. This is gonna be so weird looking. Even with clay, I'm not gonna be able to fix it up. And in the end, from this stage, my only thing that I maybe could have done is just add a little bit more of a tinfoil base. So I had to use less clay later on. But really, even though this thing ends up looking pretty weird, it does end up making a pretty good base for this structure. You know what? I think we should just stop now. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Christian Pearson. This is our No, I'm just kidding. We're not gonna stop with the tinfoil Charizard. This thing's a bit rough looking, but you know what? It could turn into something. So let's move on to the actual clay and see what we can do. So once I started putting the actual clay on, it still looked pretty derpy looking for the first while, but every step, every bit of clay I put on, I could feel it getting closer and closer and closer to what I wanted this thing to look like, and that felt really cool. It felt really good just kind of getting my hands dirty, so to speak. I tend to work digital, which is, I really like it and it's a lot of fun, but it's a bit sterile. This felt like down and dirty and gritty, and it was really cool being able to look at the thing I was working on in a full 360 degrees, pick it up, turn it around, see what angles it worked from, which ones it didn't, so I could fix it up better and better. It was just a really fun process. I highly recommend taking a crack at this for anyone who's an illustrator, because it is really fun to get another perspective on building a piece of artwork. I ended up having to make the character's cheeks a lot bigger than I was instinctively doing. I looked at some reference images of Charizard from Detective Pikachu, and his jaw near the back and his cheeks were a lot wider than I expected and than the image I had in my head. So that ended up using a lot more clay. I ended up using pretty much all of the clay I had. So by the time I was getting down to some finer details, I didn't have too much clay to work with. Once I'd gotten the general shape that I liked, I started putting in, I put in his lips, I rolled up a piece of clay for that, put that on the top and bottom. I put in that sort of meshy, fleshy bit that goes between where the upper lips and the lower lips meet. And then the eyes I ended up doing over and over again at different stages. I kept putting them at the wrong level. I would look at the thing front on and realize that one eye was lower than the other or higher than the other. So I ended up putting them in, taking them out, putting them in, taking them out, adding more to the cheeks, doing them again. And eventually I got pretty close to something I liked. It's still not perfect. They're a little bit wonky looking at the character from the front, but I'm happy enough with how they turned out. Then the last detail that I did was I put in Charizard's 4 signature teeth, 2 on the top front of his mouth, 2 on the bottom front of his mouth. I was gonna do more teeth because Detective Pikachu Charizard has kind of a full mouth of teeth, but it just didn't really feel right and I didn't have too much clay left. To make sure it really stood out as a Charizard, I was like, I'm just gonna do the 4 signature teeth that Charizard has in his cartoon version, and I'm glad I did that. I've shown a few people this thing, and they all pretty quickly recognized it as Charizard, which was nice, because I wasn't totally sure if they would or not. And funny enough, using the kitchen utensils didn't end up being any kind of problem. They were really kind of good to work with. I mean, for the most part, I was just using my hands, but using the knife and the spoon was pretty helpful at times. I used the fork occasionally, but mostly I found myself using the knife and spoon. And I never ended up using the cheese grater. Once I'd gotten a bunch of the smaller details done, I started realizing that there was still something wrong with the character. And that was, it didn't have texture. So I'm happy enough with the general shape of it. I think it's coming together decently nicely, but I think / hope it'll look a lot better once I've got some texture to it. And I didn't really know what to do texture-wise, so I looked up some advice. I pulled up Proko's channel, who I'd seen his video on sculpting a Game of Thrones style dragon a little while back. And he had some good advice for doing textures, so I'm gonna apply some of that to this, and hopefully it makes this Charizard a lot cooler looking. So the piece of advice I took from Proko's channel, which was absolutely fantastic, was to put a piece of plastic over the clay and then start sculpting and digging at the character a little bit to give it some more natural skin textures. And he obviously wasn't using a kitchen knife, but it still worked just as well for me. I really like the textures it ended up giving. I also, as you can see, took the spoon and kind of dug some more intricate patterns on top of Charizard's head just to do some, like, thicker details, and I'm glad I did that. I also do them on those things that stick out the back of Charizard's head, and I think that looks really cool, but the best part of the texturing really was just putting and you can see I used a sandwich bag because I didn't have any other kind of plastic lying around, so just more things from my kitchen to do this sculpting, but it worked out really well. I love how the textures look from this. I highly recommend doing that, and I highly recommend just watching Proko's video if you're gonna take on doing sculpting, because there's definitely way more good advice in there. And yeah, I just kind of went to town with this. I kept wrapping the plastic around different parts and carving away. I carved another little thing into the character's neck, but really I didn't do too much to the neck. I was a lot more focused on the head, and overall I just love how this texturing technique ended up making things look. I think it was so cool, and let's not delay anymore. Let's take a look at this final version of my Charizard head sculpt. You know what, for a medium that I'm not particularly familiar with, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. You can definitely tell that it's not my forte and that I don't do it that much, but I think this is decently cool looking. It's a bit wonky looking from this angle, but from the angle I was working on it at, around here or so, I think it's pretty cool looking. But definitely excited to go back to drawing videos next week, because that really is my specialty more so than this thing. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video, even though it's not me in my element. It was still pretty fun to make, so I hope it was fun to watch. I'm Christian Pearson of Popcross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.